Here's a look at a recap of your markets for this Friday, the 14th day of November. With the reopening of the federal government this week, we are starting to see some official data come in. Today was the first round where we got some official numbers for crop production and WASDE report. Next Friday, we'll get a cattle and feed report to give us some livestock market news. The November crop production report caused markets to drop lower today on the grain side. The odds would tell you that that is typically what happens a lot of times with the November crop production reports. More times than not, historically, that does cause the grain markets to move lower, and today was no exception. There was a plethora of data that come out today trying to catch up partially, but probably one of the biggest disappointments today was the minuscule cuts in average yield per acre numbers on the beans and soybeans. The industry was expecting much bigger adjustments today than what took place. On the livestock side for the week, there was a lot of volatility throughout the week. Once again, we saw some limit up moves on the futures, some limit down moves on the futures. Cattle auction barns, cash prices around, they were all over the board as well. Some markets sharply higher, some sharply lower. But if we step back and take a wider look at things, overall, there wasn't a whole lot that really happened in the cattle markets this week, other than the nearby feeder cattle contract, which was sharply higher, trying to stay in line with the CME cash feeder cattle index, as those two will have to meet in just a few more trading days. But overall, if you look at the weighted average prices on the cash prices of feeders through the auction barns, there wasn't really a whole lot of movement this week. Now, fed cattle trade was a bit lower this week. We'll start off talking about those numbers today. 53,960 head of negotiated sales this week at the feedlots. Texas turned in 2,256 head, mostly at $228. That was $4 lower. Kansas, 4,634 head, $226 to mostly $228, $2 to $4 lower there. Iowa turned in 16,750 head. Real early in the week, sales started out at 226 live, but by the end of the week on Friday afternoon, 218 to 220 was about the best most places were getting. The majority of the trade took place midweek this week at 222 to 225, 1 to 3 lower. Dress sales in Iowa, 350 to 355 covered most of it. The majority of it was at 350, $5 to $10 lower for the week. Nebraska, 21,481 head. Live sales, 223 to 225. Dress sales at 350 at 355. Box beef cutout values for the week. Choice was down $5.67 at 370.73. Select down $6.85 for the week at 354.24. The Choice Select spread at $16.49. Taking a look at what happened at the auction barns around the state this week. Not quite as big of a week as I had anticipated from what we had heard from the barns last week. Some of the cold weather earlier in the week set back a few guys from getting cattle to the barns, and then midweek when we had the markets turn lower, that also kept a few. But that being said, still a very good week overall. About 37,000 head of feeders went through the auction barns around the state. Several barns around had some kind of special sale this week of one form or another, and unlike most weeks where we might have one or two barns that have a special that stick out a little bit, just about every barn had some stick out sales this week, and it was spread throughout the state. 36 head of 424-pound steers at Mocan Livestock Market in Butler brought 513. 87 head of 520-pound steers in Ozarks Regional Stockyards in West Plains sold at 457. The average price statewide for those light 5-weight steers this week at 430. 23 head of 554-pound steers at New Cambria, 439. Had 45 head of 607-pound steers at South Central Regional Stockyards in Vienna, sell at 413. Four state stockyards in Exeter, they sold a load of 651-pound steers at 408. Joplin Regional Stockyards, they had 265 head of 739-pound steers that brought 389. The weighted average price statewide this week for the light 7-weight steers at 375. South Central Regional Stockyards in Vienna, 26 head, 752-pound steers at 376. Callaway Livestock Center sold a full load of 841-pound steers tagged as thin, 370.75. Kingsville had a load of 858-pound steers at 355.50. Lolly Brothers Livestock Market in Macon, they had a load of 907-pound steers at 344.25. New Cambria Livestock Market, they had 28 head of 540-pound heifers sell at $429. The weighted average price statewide on those light 5-weight heifers this week at $382. And then Tina Livestock Auction, 719-pound steer heifers, a full load of them on Monday brought $351. The weighted average price statewide this week on those light 7-weight heifers at $343. Taking a look at the futures markets on the livestock side for the week, live cattle, the nearby December closed $2.20 lower. The rest of the contracts were 15 to 85 cents lower. Lean hogs, 25 cents to 90 cents lower, except for the February, and it was up 2 cents for the week. Feeder cattle, that nearby November was up $12.27, still underneath what the current CME cash feeder cattle index is setting at 342.82. The rest of the contracts, January was up 98 cents, further out into next spring and next summer, 62 to 83 cents lower. On Friday, live cattle for December, 219.15 up 15, February 219.52 up 57, and April 219.57 up 97. November feeders, 338.67, up $1.67 for the day. January at 320.55, up 210. March at 313.35, up 157. Lean hogs, December closed Friday at 78.50, up 42. February 79.37, up 52, and April 83.15, up 30. Turning our attention to the grain markets at the elevators around the state, on Friday, corn was 10 to 11 cents lower, beans 22 to 27 lower, wheat down 8. Corn bids in the St. Louis region, 447, Kansas City at 425. Soybean bids, St. Louis 1126, Kansas City 1059 to 1099. Wheat bids in St. Louis at 501 to 549, Kansas City at 502. On the Board of Trade for the week, beans did end up closing higher, 8 to 11 cents. Wheat contracts, December was down a penny. The rest of the contracts stayed to 2 cents higher. And corn for the week, 1 to 3 higher. On Friday, December corn lost 11 1/4, 430 1/4. March 444, down 11 1/2, and May 452 1/4, down 10 3/4. November beans down 19 1/4 for the day, 1112 3/4. January down 22 1/2, 1124 1/2. March down 20 3/4, 1136. Wheat for December, 8 1/2 lower on Friday, 527 1/4. March at 541 1/4, down 10 3/4, and May at 552, down 11 1/2. Soybean meal for December, $5.90 a ton lower at $322.50. Soybean oil, December, 10 cents lower on Friday, $50.15. With the Missouri Department of Agriculture, that's a recap of your markets for Friday. This is Tony Hancock.